Welcome to Analyzing Finance with Nick. This video is an excerpt from an interview that I did on Beeri's Authentic Journey podcast, where we went over my story, some thoughts I have about the challenges that younger generations have in navigating the modern economy, my thoughts on travel, my thoughts on social class, and a variety of other topics that you would find interesting over a lengthy interview. I've split it into multiple parts to be digestible, which will be released throughout the next few weeks. If you like this kind of content and excerpts of me on other interviews being on the main channel feed, let me know, because as the channel grows, my speaking appearances have become in increased demand, and I'd like to share that content with you. Speaking of speaking appearances, I have updates for the Analyzing Finance with Nick tour. We just confirmed 2 new stops in Florida, one in Tampa on Thursday, February 26th, and Palm Beach on Saturday, February 28th. That's in addition to the existing events that we have already planned in Newport Beach, Beverly Hills, Sydney in Australia, and the Gold Coast in Australia. And we're also planning a special curated experience dinner in Montecito, California, near Santa Barbara in January. For those who want a more exclusive experience and more interactive type of conversation, I think the curated experiences would be interesting to you. Check the applications for those and the Eventbrite posts for the general events in the description or the pinned comment. And without further ado, let's get started.
Yeah, I remember for me when I was in college, I was sitting there trying to figure out what major I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I didn't fully believe in myself to go out and, hey, I'm going to work on my sports memorabilia business full time. I started it when I was in college, but I thought it was kind of, hey, okay, part-time hustle / can turn into a business that I can do on the side from whatever job I do. So I'm like, let's go into business administration. I think I ended up doing like a concentration in finance. And I remember sitting there in one of my finance classes one day, and the professor sitting there telling us, he's like, oh, I had a chance to invest in Facebook early on, and I didn't do it. And he sits there and he starts telling us about opportunities he may have had to like invest in other companies that are big. Or, hey, I could have invested in Uber. I didn't do it. But then I invested in this company and it failed. I'm sitting here going like excited to learn about the stock market and excited to learn about finance. And I'm like, when is he going to tell us about the investment that he made that like he succeeded at? It was great. And he made a ton of money on. And a few weeks went by. I realized I'm like, okay, if he had made an investment that made him a ton of money, then he wouldn't be here teaching the class.
That's generally true. However, there are some people who go back to teach just as kind of like a passion project after they've made their money. Like my business professors in my entrepreneurship program were venture capitalists who sold businesses, made a good amount of money, and just wanted to live a chill life in Santa Barbara. And they just taught a couple times a week to kind of give back to the community.
That sounds like a vibe, man. That sounds awesome.
Like I wouldn't mind a later stage of my life just for fun, like I'm retirement age, getting a PhD in economic history, and then just having a class at UCI or UCLA if it's only once a week. This is Nick's economic class, but it'll just be me talking about whatever I want that day.
Yeah, totally. No, sounds fun. I mean, sounds like a good thing to do to give back. I mean, we all want to give back in different ways. And it's really like noble of anybody who goes back and teaches as a college professor for a fun type of thing.
But I do get your general point.
Yeah.
Like there's those who can't teach.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is I kind of realized as the years went on, it's like, okay, the one person that didn't believe in me was me. And it's like, it took me to believe in me in order to get to a spot where I could actually go on the path that I wanted to go down and say, hey, you know, I'm actually not going to be seeking to get a job. I am just going to go all in on my business. And I'm really grateful I did that now. And looking at things, it's like, you know what you're passionate about. Yeah. Like most people know, they just don't have the audacity to basically go for it right off the bat. Like they think that they may have some kind of...
Or they're passionate about something they have no talent in.
That's possible.
Like there's a lot of musicians, for example, who may not actually be good at music, or people who want to be basketball players but who are 5'5". Like there are those examples. But I think that there's not one thing you could be talented at. That's my point. And the other thing too is you fortunately found your niche while you were in college and you had a proof of concept with the sports memorabilia. You did it the right way. You got it on the ground while you were in school, so you still finished your degree as the hedge, because that's what degrees are essentially today. They're not going to advance you up the social class ladder or be some path to the golden ticket. What they do instead is they are like insurance, so that like even if what you pursuits don't work, you could find a job that pays well enough just because you have that degree. So that's, I'd say, view your college degree more like an insurance policy than a stock investment, if I put it in financial terms. But when it comes to your case, I think you did it right with building the business while you're in school and going off on your own while you have the degree. But if somebody doesn't have something with traction already, or like a clearly defined path, even if they still kind of know what they want to do at the end game, I still think it's worth getting 3 to 5 years of experience in your field. But the difference really, in my view on career management versus maybe somebody else's, is that you don't go work to try to move up the ladder and get every promotion and like work the extra hour, 5 hours a week or 10 hours a week to get maybe an extra 1 to 5% your bonus. That doesn't really make any sense to me. I think actually the whole idea of working hard is kind of just a general issue that people don't know when it makes sense to work hard or when it doesn't, because it's not as simple as you should just work to live and do the bare minimum at all times, and also like the Gary V, I should grind at all times. Both of those aren't realistic, and both of those aren't ideal in either or optimal. But like I think the reason you need the 3 to 5 years experience, so you know, one, how does like a company in your industry actually operate and work, and you should think about that while you're at the company. Think about like, how does my boss run this business? Like, how do the numbers work? What are the things I actually need to do in terms of technology, equipment, hiring people, legal, regulatory? Like, how do I get clients? Like, you think about like, look at how your current employer does all that stuff, and just kind of use this as a time to pay. It's like college again, but you're getting paid this time. And that's kind of how I felt my working career was for me, essentially. And then the other thing is that it gives you time to save up enough money so you can have like a couple years of living expenses. So like if you don't make any money the first year or the second year of your entrepreneur journey, you don't have to scurry back to a job. So I think that the ideal time to probably start a business is in your late 20s, early 30s.
And you're sitting here talking about the people who are in college right now and may not have the opportunity to go and get jobs because of AI, right? You're sitting there, you gave an example of, hey, 2 lawyers at a firm will get hired, but the other 3 won't. Are we going to start seeing an uptick in like people going towards like, hey, I'm going to try to be an entrepreneur, like coming right out of college?
I mean, I think you'll see more of that because it's going to be more viable for a lot of businesses, especially for newer industries that, like, there was always these jokes, like right before AI came out, of like these job postings that say, oh, you need 5 years of working experience using ChatGPT, when ChatGPT was only around for 6 months. It's like, you need 10 years of experience using XYZ technology or software language that was only invented 2 years ago. Like, so there's, for those kind of industries that are new and there's not actually anybody who's a real expert in it, there are opportunities just to kind of go and do it right away. Or if you figured out your niche, to go do it right away. But I think that the risk of jobs declining to the point, we're not at that point yet. That's probably like a 5 to 10 year problem from now. I think at the current point, there's going to be less jobs, but it seems like a lot of the job losses are being absorbed by boomers retiring. And so the fact that we just have a smaller cohort of young people, because starting 2008, people started having less kids. I think that natural attrition, unless if we have some massive surge in immigration, then I think that a lot of this stuff will kind of self-cancel each other out to a certain degree. But yeah, it's going to be harder. You might have to maybe work at a more startup firm instead of working at the established big corporation right out of school. You're maybe the 3rd or 4th person at a new startup with somebody's a few years ahead of you. I think you're going to see more of that, to be quite honest, because of this.
So people going more so into entry level type of stuff coming out of college, so they
Well, it's
can
always
get.
be entry level, but what entry level is going to be different. Like entry level is going to probably require more personal risk than before. Like
Yeah,
again, you're fifth guy at the startup versus number 10,000 at Megacorp.
yeah. No, it's true, and it's interesting to just see how people go on their journeys because at the end of the day, everybody has something that they're passionate about, and not everybody's cut out to be an entrepreneur. Like, I mean, it
Yeah.
takes a certain amount of risk to stomach to be an entrepreneur. I mean, there are some days you make some money, there's some days you make zero, and then there's some days you lose some money.
I've
There's
been through all of it.
so many different things that happen, and like your path is really meant for you. Like, there's really no right or wrong way to do things. It's just interesting to hear, like, statistically speaking, what is kind of like the, I would say, average or standard things that people shoot for. Because I mean, for years you're hearing, hey, white picket fence in the suburb, husband, wife, X amount of kids, and that's kind of like a target demographic that like a
I
lot of
still
people
think that's
have.
what mostly people are shooting for, but because of like ingrained cultural cynicism, a lot of people are trying to create alternative meanings because they've kind of resigned themselves that they can't get the original goal.
It's interesting. Birth rates are declining, divorce rates are rising.
Well, actually, divorce rates are declining
Yeah,
because a lot of people who are never suited for marriage are avoiding marriage. But I think the ones who are being more smart about it, like divorce rates peaked in the 80s, in
really.
like the low 50s%. Now, like the first marriage divorce rate is probably, depending where you see it, anywhere from 37 to
So on a
40%.
percentage standpoint, or is it like from a numerical standpoint, it's higher?
Percentage of people who get married and their marriage survives for life, like it's gone up. Like
Okay.
it was like 50% in the 80s. Now it's probably 60 to 63%, depending on which source you look at.
Okay. And they're getting married like at a later age?
Yeah, they're often
Yeah.
getting married at later ages. Like that's usually correlated to economic cycles. When economic times are tough, particularly for like the middle class people, marriage age goes up. Particularly for women's marriage age goes up because a lot of people don't want to get married until they feel like they're somewhat financially stable. But I think our culture's taking it to the extreme that like and I think this is a mistake, and I talked about this in one of my videos, is that they don't think of marriage as kind of like a foundation stone to building your house. They want it to be the capstone. So they want these $100,000 plus parties that like are the equivalent of like I made it. Like this is the last time things are gonna all be about myself. And so that the expectations of wedding culture is kind of a byproduct of the culture as a whole. That marriage has become something that you do shortly after you finish school and right when you're starting work, something that you do once you've established yourself. I probably think the ideal outcome is probably somewhere in between, and I think it varies for everybody's situation. Like entrepreneurs probably should get married later, particularly men who are entrepreneurs, because they don't have to have as much of a timeline for having kids, because you don't really want to put your kids through all the risk of an early business, and you need to keep your burn low when you're starting a business. Whereas people with more stable career trajectories probably should get married at younger ages. So it really kind of depends on, I don't think there's no one size that fits all on when people should get married and how people should get married. But I think I got sidetracked. Was there something else that you wanted me to answer?
Not specifically, no. We're just shooting
Yeah.
back and forth here, and you've got some phenomenal ideas and ideologies, and
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting to think about. I mean, the way society is today with people getting married and having kids, and that you see like it all originates from, hey, what was primal, like way back in the day before
Well, actually,
society was in place for people to have, right? So back in the day there used to be a X amount of kids that was a much larger amount that was needed for survival, right? You were in a village, you'd have essentially like masculine roles and feminine roles, and then the kids would be kind of raised to step into those roles so the entire village could kind of survive.
I think it was not necessarily like the very primitive times, but it was the agricultural revolution when it started to make sense. Like once you had a family farm, you stayed in the same place. Every kid means somebody to help with the farm. The only real risk is that once the parents die, how do they split up the farm? Like that's why primogeniture was a thing. That's the idea that you only pass on the estate to the oldest child. because the reason they do it that way, not because they just favored the oldest child naturally, it was because like if you split up the farm too many ways, everybody would starve. And so the other children eventually would have to make their own paths. Like pretty much the entire southeast US was built on the second sons of nobility in Britain when they knew that only their older brother was going to get all the land at home in England. They moved to America to start the plantations. So like this has been a thing for a while. And then the marriage age thing, I think is a little bit skewed because the baby boom actually, like the post World War II era, was a record low for average age of getting married. Like the curve was shaped like this. Like in the Great Depression and in the previous economic hard times right around the U.S. Civil War, you had marriage ages quite high. Like for most of the 19th century, a lot of men didn't get married until in their 30s. And women didn't get married till their late 20s. It dropped a lot for both men and women around 1950. And you can look up the numbers if I'm a little off on this, but I think it's like 22 to 23 was men got married, and like 20 to 21 was the average age for women. That was because you had extreme levels of prosperity where back then, because the rest of the world was destroyed by the war, like you can get a job at a factory or as a young executive out of school, or if you didn't go to school, sometimes even out of high school, that in today's money would pay closer to like low six figures or even higher. So, and the cost of living was significantly lower then too, because there was just a lower population and more resources per capita. That like it was the equivalent of like the same wealth profile as somebody at 30 today was at 20 back then. And that was an anomaly. Like, I don't think we need to be going back to the era when people were getting married at 20. That was just a weird exception. And I think that the late marriage age thing is higher than usual, but I think that's just a cyclical thing as a product of stressful economic times for the reason I've said before. If you had more economic prosperity, particularly for younger people, I think the marriage age would go back to its historical mean, which is about 26 to 27 for men and 23 to 25 for women.
Yeah, and then there would be people having more kids because they'd have more time to have more kids.
Yeah. And it's actually, this is the first time I've seen a statistic that the birth rate for women over 40 is above teenagers.
Wow.
And if you look in general, a lot of the birth rate going down isn't fundamentally entirely a bad thing, because in many parts of America, the birth rate for women over 25 is higher or at the same level as it was 20 years ago. It's just women under 25 are not having kids, and particularly teenagers are not having kids, which I think is a good thing. I don't think teen parents are resulting in good outcomes for children. So it's just a matter of the way to fix the birth rate problem is you need to encourage the family that has maybe 2 kids right now to have a third, not these people who are saying that you should just try to have like 5 to 10 kids. Like, I'm from a really large family, and above a certain level, the logistics get hard and the parental attention dwindles. I think it'd be better off convincing more marginal families to have, say, like 3 to 5 kids than encouraging a few radicals who are afraid of the demographic crisis to be having 7 to 10 kids.